structure for a renal corpuscle. So over here is the renal capsule layer, the white line on the outer edge, collagen fibers there. And right inside, you'd have to be into the cortex, which is dominated by the renal corpuscles, part of one over here. And so now you can easily see the moat, the bowl in 3 dimensions, Bowman's capsule, which is discontinuous from here to here. The blade caught it just right. So it caught the air hole through the beach ball. So you can abbreviate this structure. And that's the VP, vascular pole or pore. And that allows the blood vessels to get in and out, which are making this clump. There's the glomerulus. Can even see all the little orange discs that are percolating through that capillary tuft. 25, 30 layers of capillaries packed in here. And then talk extensively in lecture about the flow that's coming from these into Bowman's capsule, the highlight of next Monday's lecture. And then off you go into the proximal tubule, where most of them you're now seeing in cross-section. It's too much to hope that you get one entire one in the same plane. So your biggest challenge here is to look at these tubules and tell which of the 3 types are you looking at. PTs versus DTs versus collecting ducts. Now, when you really organize it, it's really down to PTs versus DTs. The CDs are just so much different than the other 2. And for us with a PT, all you're going for is something like this compared to this. Nice thick cuboidal cells in the wall, much thinner cuboidal cells in this wall. 30, 35% thinner. Nice tight oval lumen, more elongated or oval for the lumen. So those are the 2 criteria you're using to tell a PT from a DT. So this one, PT, and then this, DT. You could do the same thing here. Say this one compared to this one. That's got to be a DT, more elongated, more circular, got to be a PT. Proximal versus distal. And then for the collecting duct, nuclei virtually just about touching. And you see them all close together like that. There's actually a whole bundle of them. So you've got one over here. So that's completely different from the PTs and the DTs. PT, DT, CD. Collecting duct. So you may also use CT for collecting tube, they're the same thing. So I'll make sure you have a really good comparison to tell the 3 types. Also for lecture, really good to see how those red blood cells are everywhere. These are the capillaries that are in constant association with the uriniferous tubule, all throughout the nephron. And it's really important for lecture that you always invoke uriniferous tubule in constant association with vasculature. That's what makes up a nephron. And oftentimes the vasculature is overlooked. That shouldn't happen. All right, that's everything you need for renal corpuscles, the beginning of every nephron. Would then tell you this is a part of the kidney. Which part does it have to be? There's something missing that will always tell you where this is from. You don't see any renal corpuscles anymore. Well, you know that can't be the cortex. It's the medulla. You've now crossed the CMJ line into a pyramid, which, for all of these, they're collecting ducts. The great mass of collecting ducts is really what is the majority of any pyramid. Though you do have loops going down here as well. No ID, I'll never ever point to these very tenuous structures. Little thin loops of Henle. But next week we'll talk about it as far as they allow you to concentrate a fluid. Instead of 3 gallons of urine, you can get away with a quart. All because of these long loops. You recall the juxtamedullary nephrons? Well, there's 2 of them right there. So they have a lot of physiology associated with them. Also, lots of red blood cells in here as well, so lots of vasculature also going down with the collecting ducts. Always got that vasculature in tight association with this part of the uriniferous tubule, collecting ducts. But overall, histologically, just know without the renal corpuscles, now you're in a pyramid in the medullary tissue. That's all I really want you to note there. And then we have this special epithelium, multi-layered, sort of like stratified squamous, only the cells are nice big round cells. They're not flat like squamous. So it's a stack of volleyballs instead of plates. If you can identify this type of epithelium, then you're home free. So this is transitional epithelium. As soon as you've made that identification, then it's just a matter of thin wall, ureter, much thicker wall, bladder, or vesicle. And that's what you see here in this comparison. Often with the ureter, we can get the whole structure on the slide. A nice little ureter right there. Whereas the bladder's so big, you just get a little segment of it. A little wedge-shaped area of it and say, yep, there's the big, thick muscle of the bladder, and then that transitional is just right in here. But I'll always show you something like this, or even better, this, where you can see those big bulging dome cells, or pillow cells. And say that, classic for transitional epithelium. And thin ureter, thick bladder. And don't do too much on that. I would much rather you spend most of your time on the kidney histology. And then this was just an example of the urinary bladder and the scanning. Pillow cell look to it. The first layer of cells of the transition epithelium. Okay, if you need to stretch your arm, you can pause. Start with endocrine. pituitary pineal gland. Here's the sella turcica right above the nasal cavity. The pituitary's hanging down right there. And then we say look for the finger pointing down at the pineal gland, which would be right there. Far less important to us than the pituitary. So a thin section shows this quite nicely. $500,000 meat slicer, where the brain's up here, spinal cord's over here, and hanging down from below, there's the pituitary in the sella turcica. And even here can now see an anterior part, the adenohypophysis, versus the posterior side, which is the neurohypophysis. And then the natural separation between the Grand Canyon of the pituitary, the IG cleft, right? You can abbreviate that if asked. This IG cleft is fine. The main thing is that you acknowledge it as a true structure within the pituitary, knowing that this side is completely different in all respects and derivation from this side. And that you really have two entirely different tissues residing side by side in the sella turcica. And then it's attached to what controls it up here. So if you were to ever hear master for the endocrine system, is it the pituitary? Now, what really controls it? The hypothalamus. And that's just, to be aware when we get to this in the lecture. This is the part of the brain that's controlling everything. This does the bidding of the hypothalamus. And then you got the nasal cavity where the Greeks thought snotty nose comes from this. Here's your soft palate and uvula, the oral cavity. See how close they are. Almost all the surgeries are done up through this bony floor rather than down from the top. Pituitary taken out of the pituitary fossa. Now you've got the adeno side, quite large, 75%. And then the neuro side back here at 25. But it's all wrapped up nice and tight with the meninges, or the outer coverings of the brain. So it looks like one continuous mass. And then open it up. Adeno, neuro, and then the IG cleft would wash out right in here. Obvious separation between the two. And then the stalk being attached to the hypothalamus.